right. Well, thank you for joining Community Connection number 5. So we've found that these are very helpful in reaching our families. Of course, this is being recorded as well as on Facebook Live. So thank you for joining again. Thank you, parents, for hanging in there as we've started our virtual start for the school year. Never before. We had a great start, though, last month, and really enjoyed our back to school lunch meeting, something that we had also never done outside of kindergarten. As you already probably know, kindergarten students started back with us today in hybrid. Very successful day. We look forward to our Group B students coming back tomorrow. And then again next week as we roll back into that, that hybrid, the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, every other Wednesday. I know this has been a challenging time for families, students, staff, and we appreciate your continued support as we work through our plans to phase students in. Our hope is that we can slowly and safely phase students in a grade level at a time, roughly every 2 weeks. And we will do so with the support of Spokane Regional Health District while continuing to follow the guidelines and requirements from OSPI, the Department of Health, and Labor and Industry. As we transition back into the classroom and hybrid model, please remember to keep your students home, and you're going to hear more about this if they are sick for certain reasons. We've got our lead nurse, Grace. She will be talking through some of those slides with you. But again, that's going to help us maintain our safe environments by maintaining students that are sick, that they stay home. We're saying the same thing as far as our staff as well. We do know that students and families will choose to remain 100%. We sent out a survey last week that really tied that information, and families have done a great job responding back to that process, so that we know that families that choose to be, whether they want to be in it for a while or the whole year, we are offering that information, and Vicki will share that slide as well. Tonight on our panel, we've got some great folks joining us. We've got Vicki Leifer, our assistant superintendent. We've got Grace Johns, our lead West Valley nurse. We have Dan Andrews. He's the director of special education and early learning. Tim Morgan is joining us from transportation and food service. And then Teresa Kendall, one of our principals. She's at Ness Elementary. And then Brad Lieberg at Pasadena Park Elementary. So both those principals, it's great to have you on for tonight's webinar. Tonight we will go through a series of slides and review some common questions. There will also be an opportunity to submit your individual questions via the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Please wait until we're almost finished with the presentation before you start submitting those questions, just because we may answer them over the course of the next several slides. For those of you that are on Facebook, we will not be able to answer all those questions submitted via Facebook, but we know we see some similar questions, whether it be through the Zoom or the Facebook. So we have approximately 30 minutes to answer those questions at the end. Again, like I've said, this is recorded, and so people can see this as we move forward with the information as well. Again, we know this year is going to be bumpy, and so we really appreciate the fact that we're in this together, we're working together. We're gonna hopefully do this in a safe fashion with our roll-in, but everything we're doing is really tied around our 3 strategic plan areas. So doing so in a safe and caring culture, really looking at the success for all, and then involving our community through community engagement. Hence is why we're doing this tonight as well. So cases are up, as you are aware. If I look back at the data in early September, we were at 91. So we're 100 cases more per 100,000 than we were back the 6th of September. We are working closely with Spokane Regional Health District in our process in phasing in our youngest learners, and they are still very comfortable with the process that we are in. At some point, we may have to take a pause or a brief intermission with our 2-week process, but they're still feeling comfortable with the numbers that we have, especially with the transmission rates in our youngest learners. Here's a great slide that shows that indication. So the black line is 13 to 17-year-olds. They did pull 18-year-olds off because 18 also signifies maybe a college freshman. And so they wanted really this to tie to our school-age children. And so you can see that 13 to 17-year-olds have a higher infection rate. And then that blue line is the 5 to 12, which are school-age students. And then the green line on the bottom is the 0 to 4. So our preschool students would fall into that category. So this is where Spokane Regional Health District is really supportive of our plan in Spokane County to start phasing in our earliest learners. As I said, we have phased in kindergarten today, and we'll phase in the other half of kindergarten tomorrow. When we look at our process with Spokane Regional Health District, we want to be mindful of these 5 key mitigation strategies. Consistent and correct use of masks. I'm very proud of the students that we have on campus, our staff, really helping to model that behavior. And today in kindergarten, very successful day with our youngest learners wearing masks. We've had students in our early learning center as well. And from a district perspective, that's been a positive. Social distancing to the largest extent possible. And so we've heard a lot about this 6 foot of distance. If we can maintain that 6 feet or even greater, as we've learned as early as yesterday, that'll help to reduce the number of people that need to be quarantined due to any close contacts. Hand hygiene is another good one. Of course, respiratory etiquette, covering your face, sneezing into a sleeve, that type of thing. But that hand hygiene, we're really pushing that with a frequency as far as washing hands and then using hand sanitizer as much as possible. Cleaning and disinfecting, of course, is always high priority, hitting those high touch areas, and then disinfecting the spaces so that it's ready to go for the next day. And then the contact tracing in collaboration with our local health department, we have relied on them. And as you know, we have had a case in West Valley, and our contact tracing team worked very quickly to help mitigate that situation. So like I said before, we're going to have these 5 strategies are going to help us to solve a lot of our scenarios to help build a safe plan moving forward.
So as we look at our phase-in plan, we have high, moderate, and low infection rates, and we are still in the high infection rate area. But that's when we are considering phasing in 1 grade level at a time, starting with our youngest students, which we started today with our kindergartners. It was really great to see students coming off the buses and in from the ballet line with their parents. And so what we're looking at is when we phase into a hybrid model, students would attend 50% of the time on site and 50% at home. So cohort A students would attend Monday and Thursday and every other Wednesday. Cohort B students would attend Tuesday and Friday and every other Wednesday. So if we look at the bottom of this slide, we've identified the Wednesdays that each cohort would be in attendance based on taking a look at when holidays fall and things like that. So they would be every other Wednesday. And each cohort would get 15 or 16 Wednesdays, which is 15 or 16 extra days of instruction that we think is really, really important for our learners. So how are the student cohorts determined? We initially started by splitting the entire district into basically in half based on the primary guardian's last name in Skyward, because we know some students who live in the same household may not have the same last name, and we wanted to be cognizant that those students would need to attend on the same days. So once we did that, some of the class sizes may have been unbalanced. So we're recommending to principals in school buildings to transfer students who don't have other siblings in the district to the other cohort, or students who have siblings attending in the same building, so that doesn't disrupt families who have students in multiple buildings. So that is the process. You will receive your cohort designation before you transition into your hybrid model from your school building. So when will students start phasing in? Today was the first day we had cohort A kindergarten students on site. Tomorrow will be cohort B. And Early Learning Center is starting to phase in additional days for their cohort A students and B students on Monday, October 19th. So cohort A will go Monday and Thursday, and then cohort B will go Tuesday and Friday. And they don't normally attend on Wednesdays, so they will be in that pattern for a while. So as we look at our phase-in plan, this table, you'll have access to this presentation after this Zoom on our website, shows what we're proposing to phase in for each of our grade levels. So October 8th is today, there where the arrow is, and that's where kindergartners are at. So we're hoping if things remain the same, that 2 weeks from today, we will phase in first grade. 2 weeks from the first grade phase in, we'll look at second grade, and then 2 weeks, third grade, and so on, which would allow us to phase fifth grade in right before winter break. We're looking at Centennial Middle School when we get into the moderate levels of infection rates, looking at sixth graders, and then 2 weeks later, seventh, and then 2 weeks later, eighth. For West Valley City School, they have a much smaller population of students. So at that same time frame for middle school in the moderate range, we're looking at fifth and sixth grade pods coming in together, and seventh and eighth grade pods coming in 2 weeks after that. Dishman Hills High School, they are set up in an AM/PM schedule already. That's their normal schedule. So once we're in the moderate zone there, we would phase in their students to the normal schedule. So they would be half in the AM and half in the PM. Spokane Valley High School would phase in, again, in the moderate levels of infection with their transition program students first, and then their all-day program students 2 weeks following that. And they also have a lower population of students, so we can bring all students back at that point in time in the hybrid mode. And then West Valley High School is looking at ninth grade students first, and then 2 weeks later, 12th grade, and then 2 weeks later, 10th, and then 2 weeks later, 11th. And the 12th graders, administrators felt really strong that we need to get 12th graders in just to make sure everybody's on path to graduate. And then that was a good time to do that.
All right, thank you, Vicki. WIAA, so the basically athletics, they came out with some guidance in support of following the same case per 100,000. So looking at the high category of 75 cases and above, and what that looks like in regards to team practices and or training can resume for low, medium, and high risk sports if players are limited to groups of 6 in separate parts of the field with buffer zones. And then close contact, example 3-on-3 drills is permitted. Any practice or training activity that can be done outdoors, that is very much encouraged. Scrimmages, inter-team competitions, and league games or competitions allowed for low-risk sports, but are discouraged if the school is not conducting some in-person learning. And then no tournaments allowed under both this high and moderate. And then spectators, there's some specific information about spectators. So again, as you guys remember from a previous presentation, our athletics won't start until the end of December. I think it's December 28th that winter sports would start up. And so they would be following this category. And then in the moderate and low, it just talks specifically about what exactly can happen in the moderate. So scrimmage, inter-team competitions, league games can be allowed for both low and moderate risk sports. And then of course in the low category, scrimmage, intra-team competition, league games allowed for low, moderate, and high. And then tournaments allowed. So that's one of the other indicators under that low category. And this is all part of WIA's schedule as well. So this lists out each sport as far as where they're listed in that low, moderate, and high. We've got pretty much all the sports that are listed there in the low are outdoor sports, and then moderate, of course, are the areas with volleyball, softball, and soccer, and then the high, of course, basketball, cheerleading, dance, with contact, and then football and wrestling. So we're going to continue to monitor that information as well. We do have a conditioning program starting next week in cohorts of 5, as approved by the Spokane Regional Health District as well.
So about 2 weeks ago, we asked our elementary families to choose an instructional school choice if they would have their student come back in the hybrid model when we were starting to come back on site, or if they would like to remain virtual either the entire year or part of the year with the option of returning. So thank you, families, for answering that survey. It helped us really design what the next piece of this will look like. So we know that we have 83% of families who would like to return when the hybrid model is available to their grade level. We have about 17% of families who would like to remain virtual for, again, either part of the year or the entire year. And so what that helped us do was take a look at our staffing and the students requesting that 100% virtual, either the entire year or with the intent to return. They're going to receive instruction from a new, specifically dedicated to 100% virtual learning teacher. And that transition will happen on Monday, October 26th. The 100% virtual students can request to return on-site to instruction at any point when their grade level returns into hybrid, and you would just need to contact your school directly. That transition may take up to 2 weeks, especially with transportation and scheduling if they are requiring a bus transportation from WBSD. And if you do request for your student to return on-site after being 100% virtual, schools will do their best to place the student back into the class with their original teacher. So our elementary 100% virtual teachers are listed here. For kindergarten, we have Jody Lund. First grade, Ashley Bonfield and Jamie Otsby Marsh. Second grade, Christine Dahlin. Third grade, McCall Skay. Fourth grade, Darlia Chatburn. And fifth grade, Keelan Ward. We're really excited that those teachers will be specifically dedicated to that learning group. It will be a little bit different than the hybrid, and so we needed to separate that out to really make a successful program. So the elementary online schedule, we are going to modify the current virtual schedule that your student is on starting Monday, October 12th. We have been listening to families, and we've realized a couple of things that were really inadvertent. We realized that once families start having students come back and they have a sibling who is still in virtual mode, that starting school at the same time isn't really going to work, because if I'm dropping my kindergartner off in the car and I need to transport my fourth grader along the way, they can't get back to the house in time to start their virtual class on time. So we are going to shift the start of our virtual classes forward 15 minutes so that none of our students are missing that first really important 15 minutes of class, and it allows families to drop off younger siblings on site and return back home in time to get onto their virtual class. We've also been hearing that the lunchtime can be pretty tight, especially in the 3rd through 5th grade schedule, for families to load everybody up in the car, go to our grab and go lunch sites, get back home, open the lunches, eat them, and then in time to get back onto their virtual learning. So we are extending lunchtime as well. And the elementary schedule will look like this. So the big changes are here. 9:45 to 10:45 is a real-time virtual classroom instead of starting at 9:30, again, to allow that time for families to drop off their younger siblings on site. Lunchtime has been extended here by 15 minutes. And then we switched the small group learning and the independent practice here in these 2 blocks of time. And that really is a flexible block. Those 2 blocks of time are pretty flexible depending on what you already have in place with your teacher. And if you're able to get lunch and still attend small groups during that time, you can work individually with your teacher to continue to make that work for your family. We know that schedule changes can be frustrating. We do appreciate your flexibility. We just really weren't comfortable with knowing that we would have students missing the first 15 minutes of class once their siblings started going back, even up to 8 weeks if you're a 5th grader, which would be almost 12 hours of instruction. So we really needed to make that shift, and we appreciate you partnering with us as we move through that. The hybrid schedule will also look a little bit different when your grade level returns on site. So there'll be on-site classroom instruction separated from what's happening at home. And those two things will be bridged together. So if I am in cohort A, I attend what's highlighted here Monday and Thursday. So on-site in the classroom, I'd be getting new learning and instruction, small group learning, individualized support, music, PE, social emotional learning, the really, relational interaction. And then on Tuesday, I would be working on anything assigned by the classroom teacher, independent skills and practice, the personalized learning plans in iReady Math and reading that are very clearly tied to either what I learned on Monday or what I would be learning on Wednesday. So it's really a partnership between what's happening at school on site and what would be happening at home. And then cohort B is just the opposite. So the on-site classroom instruction would be Tuesdays and Fridays. And Grace will talk about health and safety.
All right. So we have our 4 big things that we're doing to help prevent COVID. So number 1 thing is staying home if you're sick. When in doubt, please stay home, call the school, and we can help you work through if you do indeed need to stay home. Next thing is wearing your mask, which is required of every student and staff. And then watching your distance, social distancing of at least 6 feet if we have masks on, and more than that if we have masks off when we're eating and things like that. And then washing your hands frequently. And then we have our school flow chart from Spokane Regional Health District. And this is what is helping us work through the different type of scenarios we have with COVID. And so you can find this information on their website, but this is a flow chart that helps us know if we have a notification of someone who's positive, whether it be a student, employee, or a visitor. And at that point, we call and report that to the health district, unless they're the ones that let us know. Usually we know first, so we call them right away and let them know. And they begin the contact tracing of kind of within the community, and then we begin our contact tracing of close contacts at the school in coordination with them. And then if we do have a positive case, everybody in that class receives a letter, and then close contacts receive another letter letting them know that they're a close contact and they need a quarantine for 14 days. And each one of those is really handled on it's a case-to-case basis, again, where we work really closely with the health district to help us determine who the close contacts are and how we can proceed safely. And then we have our go ahead. And then we have this document that is really, really good from Spokane Regional Health District that tells us kind of what we should go through every day before we're coming to work in school. And so the first big question we ask ourselves, and it's also on all the attestations, is if we've been around somebody that is COVID positive. If the answer is no, we go to the next question, which is if we are having any symptoms of COVID. And we have these symptoms off to the side, which right now is a pretty long list of symptoms. We are expecting to get some new guidance on this, so if and when we do, we will definitely let people know. But right now, we have been asked by the health district to err on the side of caution. So any student having any of these symptoms is expected to stay home, and if they have these symptoms at school, they will be sent home. And then it is recommended that anybody who has these symptoms isolate for 10 days. And then get tested. And then based on the test results, if it's negative, then they can come back to school. If it's positive, then they would continue to isolate for 10 days from onset of symptoms, assuming that they are feeling better, having improvement of symptoms, and haven't had a fever within the last 24 hours. The other option, if you feel that these symptoms are not due to COVID, is to talk to your physician and get a letter from your physician stating that these are not related to COVID. And in that case, your student would be able to come back to school. And then again, we have the no, which means that they're good to come to school, wear a mask, social distance. And then we have the other side, which is if you have been exposed to somebody that is positive for COVID. And the big thing here to know is if the answer to this is yes, you should not be at school and you should be quarantining for 14 days. It is recommended that you get tested. But even if you have a negative test, you still have to be away from school for 14 days. And the reason that is that it can take 14 days for you to get the virus. And so we don't want you at school potentially spreading the virus, even though you tested negative earlier. And then it goes through, said if the person lives with you, if you're having symptoms and the different scenarios with those. So again, if your child's having symptoms or if you're unsure, please call the school and we will have somebody call you back and help you work through the specific situation and whether or not it's safe to be at school and what the recommendations would be. And then we have our daily symptom check cards. So we have these blue cards that are being handed out to all our students that are returning. And we are asking that your child come to school this every day. This attests that they are not having COVID symptoms and also that they have not been around someone that is positive or having COVID-like symptoms for the last 14 days. And then we have a couple questions here. So what happens if a student is sick? So again, if your student is sick, please keep them home, call the school and let us know why they're absent. And if you can identify what symptoms they're having, that's helpful. And then depending on the symptoms, a school employee will call you and follow up regarding when it would be considered safe for your student to return to school. And then what happens if a student becomes sick at school? So if we have a student who becomes sick at school, as we always have, we will call the parent or guardian. If it is COVID-like symptoms, they will be isolated within the building until the parent arrives. And then we do have a letter from Spokane Regional Health District that we send home that kind of goes through, again, the symptoms they're having, that they are COVID-like symptoms, and what the different options are. And we'll also be having a school employee follow up with you to see about when the student can return to school. And again, so the three options, if a student is either sent home with COVID-like symptoms or you need to keep them home with COVID-like symptoms, or they need to stay home and isolate for 10 days, or have a negative COVID test, or have a doctor's note stating that their symptoms are not due to COVID to return to school. And then we have a scenario of what happens if a teacher is sick. So if one of our teachers or staff members is sick, it is expected that they go over the same symptoms every day, and it is expected that they stay home, and a substitute teacher will be following the teacher's plans to deliver instruction. And then we have a close context clarification here. So if we are alerted of a positive COVID case, whether it be staff or student, our COVID team will be working to determine contact tracing immediately. And in conjunction with Spokane Regional Health District, will determine any close contacts, and all of these close contacts will be notified directly. So if you are not notified directly, you know that you are not a close contact. And then we have our West Valley School District COVID dashboard to let you see kind of what's going on within our district. This will be updated weekly or potentially more, but for sure weekly. And this just has our positive cases and close contacts for each of our schools. So if your student is identified as a close contact, which means they have been around someone who has tested positive, again, please do not have them come to school. This is a 14-day quarantine, regardless if they test negative and regardless of if they are not having symptoms. And please call the school to report the student's absent and let us know that they have been identified as a close contact. Okay, and then we have a few different scenarios here just to kind of visually help you see what a close contact looks like. And so here we have our student with a plus that has tested positive for COVID. And so all individuals sitting immediately next to them would be most likely close contacts and notified to quarantine. Again, any case we work with Spokane Regional Health District to determine and ensure that we are identifying these close contacts correctly, and we are using the correct parameters that they have. So this is with our students 6 feet apart, so any of these students sitting adjacent to this student would be considered a close contact, and this is assuming that all our students have masks on. And then we have our scenario at lunchtime or snack time perhaps in our class or cafeteria, where we have a student eating, and it's just if one student has their mask off and the student tests positive, then this expands to 15 feet for our close contacts. And so anybody within that 15 feet will be identified as a close contact and notified. And again, like I said, each contact, we're gonna work closely with the health district to determine that we are not missing anybody and we have everybody identified that should be. Okay, and then we have some frequently asked questions. So does my student have to stay home if their sibling is sick? So no, if the sibling is sick, your student does not necessarily need to stay home as well. If your student has been around somebody that has been identified as a close positive and is sick, in that case, that would be a situation where we would want the siblings to stay home, because then we have a probable positive situation. And so until we have a test result, we would ask that you keep all siblings home in that case. Are all COVID-like symptoms treated the same? With our current guidance, any of those symptoms listed are treated the same, and it is expected that these students be kept home or sent home if they're having the symptoms. The only exceptions right now to that are if we have a kid that we have previous documentation that they have perhaps migraines or something like that. So if we have that documented from a doctor and they're having a migraine, then we would not require them to be home for 10 days or have a negative test, assuming that was the only symptom they have. And so again, if you have a situation where your kid's having symptoms that you feel are due to a medical condition they have, but we don't have documentation of that, we ask that you get documentation from your doctor stating that that is from not COVID related and from a different condition. And once we have that, your student would be able to come back to school. And then, do students really have to stay home for 10 days if they are sick, and 14 days if they are a close contact? So again, the 10 days, there are the 2 other options there that can potentially reduce that. If they are having symptoms, they can get tested, and if they test negative, they can come back to school, assuming that their symptoms are improving and they haven't had a fever in the last 24 hours without medication, or they can get the note from the doctor stating that these symptoms are not related to COVID. And then the 14 days of a close contact, that is a non-negotiable. They have to be out for 14 days, regardless of a negative test and regardless of if they are not having symptoms.
So transportation is up and running and has been for a little while. I'm sure that a lot of people have seen buses running around in the neighborhoods. The buses are offering services on the cohort model. So students are able to catch the bus if they're scheduled for Mondays and Thursdays. The bus will be available for them on those days and every other Wednesday. Some of the precautions that we're taking on our buses: everybody has assigned seats before they get on, so the drivers are dictating those seats before students board. We are keeping students as far apart as possible. As the buses fill, we will be requiring that siblings share a seat when we get to the point where we have to have students share seats. Masks are required in order to be on the bus. And then the bus drivers are looking to see that students have their daily check so that we can assist schools with making sure that those are all being maintained. One thing to keep in mind with transportation this year, if you have a bus stop that is not in a location that you think is appropriate for your student, it is taking us a lot more time to evaluate those stops and potentially move stops. In most cases, we are not able to adjust bus stops unless there is a real significant safety concern for students and some kind of road hazard. So if you have those concerns, feel free to contact the transportation department, and myself or some of my staff will help you work through that issue. And then lunches. Last month we did about 10,000 meals for families who have been using our drive up meal option. All students will be able to eat for free. That includes students that are attending on site. So if your student goes back to school at Millwood or at Seth Woodard in the next week or so, they would be able to access those free meals at no charge to families. Breakfasts and lunches will be served as grab and go, just like they have been since last spring. If you are attending in person, then those meals in most cases are being delivered down to your classroom, or if you're eating in the cafeteria, you're eating in small groups, and the kitchen staff are helping to serve those. There's not a lot of choices with lunch this year. We don't have any of our salad bars open. We don't have any really choice options for students unless they have an allergy or some other kind of medical issue with food. So meals are what they are. And if your child is going to eat one of the free meals, they'll get the same thing that everybody else gets. And drive-up feeding sites will continue to happen. If you live near one of the sites that is already serving the community, that's not going to change. You'll still be able to stop and pick up meals if your child is not attending physically on site that day. Also, we are still collecting free and reduced applications for this school year. If you have found yourself to recently have been laid off or your income has changed, please feel free to fill out one of those applications. This free meal program is only good through December. So once we get into January, at this point, families will have needed to have filled out those free and reduced applications if they want to continue to get free meals. So if you think you might qualify, you can go online to our website, fill out the form, and we'll help you through that process if you need it.
Okay, so we have a few questions here. If a parent chooses virtual right now, are they committed for the year? No, if a parent chooses virtual right now and are more comfortable later in the year to return on site, they can make that request to the school. That may not be immediate. It may take up to 2 weeks to schedule transportation, but schools will work with you to have your student come back into the building on site.
So if a student has COVID symptoms at school, what happens? So if we have a student with COVID symptoms at school, parent and guardian will be called. They will be put into the isolation room until the parent comes. And then again, we have our sick letter from Spokane Regional Health District that we will send home that helps you know what the different choices are or options are for them returning to school. And we'll also have a staff member following up with you to go over kind of how they're doing and the different options as well. And then we have, what if someone tests positive in my class? So if we have a student or staff member in the class that tests positive, the whole class will be notified that there was a positive case in the class, and then any close contacts will be notified separately that they are close contacts and required to quarantine for 14 days.
All right, number 4 here's for me. So why was the decision to start bringing students back on site made so quickly? This is also kind of alluded to in our Q&A about why are we ignoring the 125 case threshold. According to SRHD, the numbers are 225.7 per 100,000, and that's outside of our threshold that we had on the document. So like the asterisk on that document that Vicki showed, we are working closely with Spokane Regional Health District to help us to determine when it is safe for students to return on campus. We have several of our buildings that have students on campus right now and have continued to work on all the protocols. And with their support, Spokane Regional Health District has allowed all of Spokane County schools to phase in kindergartners at this time. And when we look at the report in regards to the number of cases, there are 3 high number days that will be rolling off in the next couple of days. And so their decision and their support of our plan is around those numbers and looking at the infection rates too within that age group and the support that they've given to us to move forward on this plan. So there we go. So I just kind of answered that question too, because that was one that was in that that list. So we continue to monitor that information, and like I said, Spokane Regional Health District is on speed dial for us right now.
Will my students have a new teacher if they choose to remain 100% virtual? So yes, your students will have a new teacher starting October 26th for that particular teacher to be dedicated 100% to all of the virtual learners in that student's grade level. I think you're muted, Kyle.
Okay, there we go. All right, double clicking on things. Will walking to school ever be acceptable? So I'm going to have Tim talk about this because in West Valley we have there's a lot of obstacles, whether it be train tracks or Trent or Argonne. And so one of the things that we're working with, of course, our parents, we want to try to keep as less the amount of population on our buses as possible, because we're trying to separate kids as much as possible. But of course, if you're within a period or a location where it's safe to walk to school, we hope that you will do that. Of course, dependent upon weather. But I know Tim works a lot with the safe routes to school in West Valley. So Tim, do you want to elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, so walking to school is always an option for you if you're comfortable with it. So I would strongly encourage anybody who feels like their children are capable and able to navigate walking to school safely to do so. The only thing we ask is that you not have them cross railroad tracks if you can avoid it. Other than that, we have a lot of neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks or have varying degrees of safety measures in their communities. And so we have a lot of bus stops that are relatively close to our schools. If your child normally would walk or ride their bike, they certainly can continue to do that. There's no requirement that students ride the bus at all.
And one of the pieces too, thank you, Tim, for that help, is making sure that your students, if they are walking, will have that blue card that they can present when they come up to the school. And then, as always, right, if you've got a K first or a second grade student in those youngest grades, we are hopeful that you're walking with them or have older siblings that are helping to get them to school safely. And so I know as parents, you will continue to monitor that as well.
So next question, why do we have to do the hybrid model? Other districts are coming back full-time face-to-face. So as we've been working with Spokane Regional Health District, they're incredibly comfortable with our hybrid model structure. In particular, we have a little bit of a unique situation with our kindergarten center. All of our kindergarten classrooms, except for one, are in one building. And so a hybrid model there is necessary because there are just as many students there in the building as a full-time kindergarten face-to-face in a regular elementary building. So we're really just looking at approaching it with an abundance of caution as we roll in our grade levels. The next question, my child started virtual kindergarten today. If the district goes all virtual again because of high virus numbers, does my child switch to his original kindergarten teacher for virtual with her or stay virtual with Miss Lund? So your child would stay virtual with Miss Lund. We know that switching teachers, especially after they've had one for about a month, is not ideal. And so we want to keep as much consistency as we can. So your child, unless they would like to return on site, would stay with Miss Lund for the virtual remainder of the year. My kindergarten schedule said she only goes on Wednesday the 14th and not again till November 18th. Is this correct? So the kindergarten center is also doing WA Kids Wednesdays, and I believe November 14th, and then that following and maybe October 28th are the days that the teachers will be doing their walk kids meetings with the students. And so that's why your schedule might be a little different than the one you saw on the presentation today.
Another great question here. Why can't the youngest grade in any school building go back at the same time? So I'm assuming that's like a K2 group. And so I believe Vicki alluded to this earlier in the presentation that talked about our phase-in model and really setting things up so that we can continue to monitor and safely transition kids in one at a time, grade by grade. And hopefully with that success, we will be able to continue to phase in our students in the upper grades as well, based on that plan.
Okay, and can children bring their own travel size hand sanitizer? So we would ask that your student not bring their own in, and the reason being is we have students with allergies that this could trigger, or other health conditions, and then also it could be concern for if it is hand sanitizer that will indeed kill the germs that we need to kill. We do have a lot of hand sanitizer at the schools. Every classroom has them. So I can assure you that we have enough hand sanitizer at the schools for every child.
So the next one, how are kids going to get small group learning at school if teachers are not allowed to be within 10 feet of their students? We actually have different grades of masks that if a teacher needs to be within 10 feet of their students, they can upgrade their personal protective equipment that protects the teacher and the students when they're within that range, and then they can move back out. And our elementary teachers in particular are really good at what's called workshop model, and they move their students around in a way that really makes sense to them, and the independent piece of the student doing what they need to do in their particular workshop group is a pretty fun thing to watch. So they'll get their small group learning in the classroom.
What if your kid gets a stomach bug? Do they have to be isolated for 10 days? With some of the symptoms, it could be anything, not COVID. Could be allergies, ear infection, sinus infection, etc. So yes, I know this is really frustrating for people, but right now with our current situation in COVID, again, we are being asked to err on the side of caution. And so the only way to really determine that it's indeed not COVID is to get tested. Again, if you have a doctor that will write a note that says it's not COVID, we would also accept that. And then the other encouraging thing I can tell you is we really we're supposed to get new guidelines either Friday or Monday from our Department of Health, and I think it is going to help with some of these more minor symptoms and having to keep kids home. So I think that'll help a lot with this situation too.
Grace, do you see that next question there about mild asthma too?
Thank you. I had to scroll down a little. So with kids who have mild asthma, they cough often. Will parents be instantly called to pick them up, or will there be case judgment? They also do get headaches. So yes, if we have previous documentation that your kid has asthma, then coughing, if it's just a cough that we believe would attribute it to asthma, they would not necessarily be sent home in that case. So we would be doing an assessment and helping determine that.
Next question is around, are sanitizers and cleaners sprayed around and used around the kids, or only when they aren't in class buildings? Of course, that can trigger coughs and headaches for some kids. So we're not using aerosols. We have spray bottles with a approved cleaner, and then there are some hand wipes or disinfecting wipes that'll be used. And our goal is to try to do that as much as possible when kids are not in the classroom, because there's some time that is around how long that sanitizer or disinfectant needs to be on the surface. Our custodians are doing an amazing job of going around and taking care of the high touch areas. And then, of course, when students are not on campus, our night crew is going in and ensuring that those spaces are done in a way that it's ready for the next day. Next question's around the attestation. So those blue cards, we went a little old school right now, and we're finding that that's a great way to really track and determine who has filled out a card versus being able to track a student that might have been done online and not knowing until they're in the building without having that knowledge before they enter. So we're finding these today worked great in our kindergarten center, and we've used these for some of our other students that are in other buildings. We are going to continue, like Grace said, we might be modifying these a bit with some DOH guidelines changes. But this is our process right now, and we might modify it over the course of the next month or so. But that blue card is really effective in helping us to ensure that our students are coming to school without symptoms.
If students have to stay home, can they go back to online classes until the 10 days have passed, or if they are out for an illness or worry over an allergy, cough, or headache or cough? So we have thought about what that might look like. So if a student is getting tested, they could be out 3 days, they could be out 10 days, 14, or even up to 24 days. And so you would work with your school on that to make the best choice for your student. And we do have the option of the online virtual teacher for that 10-day period, if that is the choice that makes the best sense for you. If it's the 3-day period, it could be just that the classroom teacher that is the on-site teacher is sending work home to complete while the student is waiting on their test results. So it's really a case-by-case basis, and we're flexible and we're willing to work with you and meet the students' needs really where you're at.
If more than one student is positive in a classroom, will the whole class quarantine? And if there is more than one classroom with a positive case, what happens to the school staying open or closing completely for 14 days? So again, any of these situations, we're going to be working with Spokane Regional Health District, and they're going to be helping us determine. The biggest thing is if there's any transmission at school, and if we start to see signs of that, then we're potentially going to be quarantining whole classes and things like that. 2 classes within one classroom right now, the guidance would be most likely that we would quarantine the whole class. But there are exceptions to that if there's documentation that both of these cases were clearly not transmitted at school and they can trace it back to where they were, then there may be situations where that won't happen. And then what happens to the school staying open or closing for the 14 days? So again, that's something that Spokane Regional Health District will help us determine based on our positive cases and what we're able to track with those.
So the question is, will meals be available during conference days? And the short answer is yes. Our kitchen staff work on conference days. Normally we do trainings and are working on cleaning kitchens and doing other things those days. So those are normal work days for all of our kitchen staff. So they will be continuing to serve through the drive-up option for people. I would recommend that if your student has a conference that day, that you make some kind of an arrangement to get them meals. But we are definitely going to be open and ready to serve the community on those days.
Schedules show teacher availability from 8:30 to 9 and 3 to 3:30. I heard this was not going to be the case. What is going to happen? So teachers are still available from 8:30 to 9 and 3 to 3:30. We just added the by appointment. So you just need to contact your teacher and let them know that you would like to talk with them in either of those times, and they'll be available for you.
So the question, if we decide to drive our children to school for the beginning of the hybrid model and then want to later change to busing, would we need to contact the transportation office? So yes, you would need to let us know. You probably would need to also communicate with the school because everybody has to have an assigned seat before they get on the bus. we would need to know at least a week or more ahead of time so that we can reshuffle the seating chart as we need to and add your student into a safe spot on the bus. Again, we are recommending that if you can get your children to school without using the bus, that may be the best option this year.
Is work at home all self-paced, unsupervised work by the student? This doesn't seem like school education, but simply homework with students attending school part-time. So all of this, yes, it's self-paced. And what it does is we're asking teachers to make a very intentional bridge between what the student learned either the previous day or what the student will learn the next day to prepare them for their instruction and education. And the other piece of that is the personalized pathway and individualized instruction for Ready Math and Ready Reading is very specific to the student and building the skills where they're at, and that'll be an important piece of those days.
Question here, why can't one grade per secondary school go back as well? So as one of the slides we showed, the infection rates among those students in that 13 to 17 range is some of the highest. And so they're not, at this point, Spokane Regional Health District is not comfortable in looking at phasing those students in within those ranges right now. And so we're going to continue to focus on phasing in one grade level at a time, starting with our youngest learners. Okay, during class, is there 10 foot or 6 foot of distancing? So this is one of those that we learn a lot about. So you could see in the slide that Vicki showed, that Grace talked through, that the requirement is that students are sitting 6 feet apart from each other. In some of our classrooms where we're hybrid, we're able to maximize that, where students might be up to 10 feet apart. We're trying to maximize as much space between students as possible to limit the number of close contacts. And so in some classrooms, it just happens that 6 feet is what we have the ability to do. But in some classrooms, we are trying to extend as much as possible to expand outside of that 6 foot range. Anything else on that, Vicki?
I'll do the next one. For the online students that are 100% virtual and have an IEP, how do they receive extra help for the academics? Also, when will parents be notified who their teacher is, and expectation, will there be a meet and greet period? So I'll tackle the second part first. So parents will be started to be notified next week who their virtual teacher is. And again, that transition period will happen October 26th. We're giving that time for the teachers to have the meet and greet period, for the online teachers to reach out, that the students would still be with their teacher that they are right now, so they can make an easy transition into that next phase of the 100% virtual learning. Dan, would you like to talk about the IEP part?
Yeah, so they will, students that are 100% virtual and have an IEP, they will continue to get services from their case manager, from their building. It shouldn't necessarily look any different than what they've been doing so far with the 100% virtual. Just they'll have a different gen ed teacher leading their classroom instruction. But if you do have questions about that, I would encourage you to reach out to your students or your child's case manager. But I don't see it being any different. But if, like I said, if you do have questions, contact your special education teacher or case manager.
So the next one, what if the teacher gets COVID? So if the teacher is sick and we attribute that to a positive COVID case, our teachers are in the higher grade personal protective equipment, which also protects those around them and themselves. So they may or may not have students identified as close contacts. If they're teaching virtually and they are healthy enough to continue teaching virtually, they can teach virtually from home. So it would just, education would just continue as normal for the virtual classroom. If they're teaching on site, they would get a substitute teacher and provide sub plans for the students. Grace, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, and then So if they are on site or around other staff or students, we will be sending the class letter home if class is in session, and then identifying any close contacts of that teacher and letting them know that they need a quarantine.
Any idea of high school starting time date? So I actually just did the calendar here. If everything goes perfectly as planned, we would be looking at starting to phase in middle school and high school in January. And that is a hopeful, perfect planned scenario.
Which kind of goes into that next question of what does it mean we will pause if cases go up? So we are in that process on a weekly basis of communicating with Spokane Regional Health District and running plans through them. And so if there's a situation where the case count between our youngest learners, they were some of the lowest numbers of cases, if that were to go up, they may ask us to pause in regards to our next grade level that we would be transitioning in during that time frame. So we'll continue to monitor that and communicate that process out as well, because I think at this point our target date is the 22nd for first grade.
If children have to stay home due to exposure in school, how disruptive will it be for them to move to virtual for the quarantine period? So if you're quarantined for 14 days and you're wondering what that looks like for your student to continue their education, I think it's a case-by-case basis. So if the whole classroom is quarantined, that teacher may just be able to continue education with the rest of the class from home with all of the students. If it's one or two students, then they would have plenty of options. They would have an option potentially to virtual in with their teacher if that is something that you and the teacher decide is a possibility. They'd have an option to move into the virtual teacher's classroom if that was an option. They'd have an option to come pick up work. I mean, we're trying to be as flexible as we can. We know this is not going to be an ideal situation, and we're learning as we go. So it's just really partnering with you to find out what works best for your student in that particular situation.
And then question around why are we waiting 2 weeks between phases? Why not phase them in weekly? Our original plan was to phase 2 grade levels in at a time. That was put in front of Spokane Regional Health District and modified to a 2-week phase in. There's a lot of moving parts, of course, as you have all seen with the requirements that we're going through, and it just requires that week leeway between when we can activate a phase-in model. And so that just requires us to have that 2-week period of time between grade levels. But as we know, everything's a fluid, and it hopefully might change or it might not change.
Can students change from cohort A to cohort B for personal scheduling preferences? Yes, contact your school or schools of your students and make that request, and I'm sure they can accommodate. Next one, I did not respond to the survey in time. Will my child be automatically assigned hybrid or virtual, or do I still have an opportunity to voice a desire? You have an opportunity to voice a desire at any point in time, so please contact your school. Right now, they are currently still on their on-site classroom teachers roster, so that would be in the hybrid at the moment. If you would like virtual, please connect with your school and let them know.
All right, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share some closing thoughts here in a second. But one of the things that I want to just say, this is a huge partnership with you as family members, with our staff, with our students, to help us to build success and build success step by step. Today we had kindergartners in, and it was so exciting. We've transitioned students in over the last couple of Mondays. Today I had a teacher in one of our buildings that had a student taking a high cap test, and he was peeking in the window because he is so excited to see somebody on site. And that's infectious. We've got staff that are ready when we're able to transition students in more of those grade level by grade level. And so appreciate your support and your help as we slowly start this phase-in process. And it takes all of us. It takes the entire team. It takes parents, staff, community, and our students working together to help us with that safe plan. And I know there are a lot of restrictions about when you can send your kids to school and when you can't, but your help is going to help us to maintain that safety aspect for all of our students and staff when they're healthy and able to come to school. Again, communication remains our top priority, and we'll continue to update you. Our staff in each of our buildings are sending out their information in newsletters, and we'll continue to do that. And if ever you have questions, reach out to your child's teacher, reach out to their school. We've got amazing frontline staff that can help get questions and answers to you in a timely manner. With that, I'm excited that we've got principals on our Zoom today, and we'll see kids coming back into their buildings. I know they've already got some kids in their buildings, so let's start off with a principal's perspective from Teresa and some closing thoughts. Teresa, Ness Elementary Principal.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks to everybody. And I just want to say thank you to our families for your patience and your flexibility. And thank you to our teachers who have embraced this challenge and sought out opportunities to make it special for our kids, because our kids are the reason why we're here. And we cannot wait to see you all. And we're working hard to make that happen while keeping us all safe.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa, for joining us tonight. Brad, principal perspectives from you as well.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this tonight. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of the families in West Valley School District, but especially those here in Pasadena that have helped us kick off the school year and get a great start. It's not an ideal situation, but we are extremely gracious and thankful for all the work you're doing, helping your kids engage with their classrooms and their teachers and stay connected to their learning. I know our staff are all, to every single one of them, very excited to get kids back in the building and engage with them. Again, thank you very much. We're working really hard. Look forward to sending out some pretty good videos and some communication helping those families learn the new processes and procedures here at Pasadena.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Teresa, principals joining us tonight. And then Dan Andrews, Special Services Director and Director of Early Learning Center.
Yeah, so we're finishing up our third week with students in person in our highest need special ed rooms and also here at ELC. And I just want to give a shout out to all the staff and students and families of those populations. It's went really well. I've been able to go to those classrooms and see the students working and studying and doing what they need to do, and staff have done a tremendous job too adjusting. So I just want to thank everybody there. And ELC here at the Early Learning Center will be going into 2-day hybrid starting October 19th, and I know staff here are really excited for that. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I walked into one of those classrooms today, and one of the students was telling the teacher he was so excited that the Patriots finally lost. So, all right, Tim, you're up. Closing thoughts.
So our goal with transportation and nutrition services is just to provide the best service that we can in the safest way possible. Our kitchen staff have been working since last spring all through the summer to provide meals and make that as accessible as possible to everybody. If your students are riding the bus or receiving meals, take a moment and say thanks to those staff members who've been working really hard to make sure that that can happen. Bus drivers are working really hard right now to learn students' names and get them assigned seats before they get on the buses. Most of the drivers are having to juggle 2 to 3 times the number of stops and routes that they're used to because of the AB schedule. They are trying to keep all of those things in their heads, and that's frustrating for them because they normally can do that, but in this year, most of them cannot. So if you're experiencing some delays on the bus or you feel like something was maybe missed, just call the transportation office. We can usually get the drivers up on the radio within a couple minutes and find out what was going on. But the drivers are trying really hard to make sure that they are where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. There's just a lot of moving parts this year. So if you have questions or concerns, feel free to call the office. But if you see a driver or a kitchen staff member, just give them a big thank you from your family.
Great, Tim. Thank you. And that's one of the things too, 10,000 meals in September. That's an amazing accomplishment. So, all right, Grace.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to everybody for their patience. Like I said, I know this is a frustrating time for people. And as Kyle stressed, communication is just huge right now. If you can communicate with us what's going on, we can help you work through those different scenarios and whether it's safe to be at school. It's been really encouraging so far in our meetings with Spokane Regional Health District, because what we're seeing right now is these mitigation that we're doing at the schools to help prevent spread is working. And right now, they're not seeing any evidence of transmission at schools. So that's really encouraging. And so again, just please ask questions, please call us if you're not sure, and we will help work through those different situations.
Great. Thank you, Grace. Appreciate your help through all of this as well from the medical field. All right, Vicki, closing thoughts.
I think in addition to thanking parents and families, also would like to thank our community childcare providers in helping us partner with our students during the day and helping them with their meeting their virtual instruction times and all of that. So just really happy to be a part of West Valley and have this community support that we do have. So thank you. And
you know, the big takeaway is this is a big team effort, and everybody on the team is going to continue to work together. It's going to be a little bumpy. We may take a few losses in regards to just some challenges that we face, but we need to continue to bounce back up and work together to solve those problems. And communication is the key. So we need your help, and we need to get through this like West Valley always does, and that's together. And thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you to our entire team. Thanks for joining us. It's great having some additional folks on here that are in the buildings working with students on a daily basis. And we look forward to seeing another group of kindergarten students tomorrow and their parents, picking them up and dropping them off or riding the bus, like Tim had said. So have a wonderful evening and stay tuned for some future community connections.